Bill Downing. Now here's a man folks couldn't stomach in old Arizona. Sullen, mean-tempered, and downright ornery even when sober, and twice as nasty with whiskey in his belly. He was so unlikable that even his own gang could hardly stand the sight of him. His name lingered in Arizona not for glory, but for the trouble he left behind. Well, let's get into it, shall we? My name's Steven, and welcome to Wild West Deep Dives. William or Bill Downing was born in Texas in 1860, a man of average height with hazel eyes and black hair. Not much is known about his early life, other than he was a cowboy who may have come to Arizona because of some trouble he got into. Regardless of what troubles he had, the man who would later be known as Bill Downing arrived in Cochise County with his wife in the late 1890s. According to Phyllis de la Garza, a Western historian who lived in Willcox, Arizona, wrote that he was one step ahead of a Texas posse upon his arrival. Similar to many others who went west, Downing kept his past to himself, and those around him were not inclined to pry. He and his wife made their home close to the small mining town of Pierce in Sulphur Spring Valley. Downing sought employment at local ranches, while spending a lot of his downtime around Willcox saloons. On the 8th of August 1883, John A. Rockfellow and Walter E. Servas, both from New York, joined by seasoned Kentuckian A.J. Jack Spencer, had rode into the Sulphur Spring Valley and established the Esperanza Ranch, with their brand being NY. The ranch was located at the entrance of a canyon that leads to the Cochise Stronghold, a rocky natural fortress on the eastern side of the Dragoon Mountains. The ranch thrived in spite of lurking outlaws and roaming Apache raiders, and it was here that Downing managed to secure steady work. Mort Wayne from Cabezas, a local cowhand, viewed Downing as a friendly, nice-talking fellow, but soon realized he would get as mad as an angry rattler once that whiskey hit his lips.
Downing were a very dangerous man,
Pierce rancher Jesse James Benton stated,
and always ready to tell on the other feller and never were liked among the cowboys for that.
By the spring of 1899, Willcox, Arizona was a town where cattle, cards, and gun smoke kept the days turning. Bill Downing had tied himself in with Constable Burt Alvord's band of rough characters. Mean and quarrelsome, Downing drew suspicion wherever he went. One man who didn't trust him was Bill Traynor, known as Slim. Traynor was 32, a Tennessean who'd ridden with Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders in Cuba, and folks in Sulphur Springs Valley liked him. He had friends, admirers, and was soon to marry Mila Allier, a young woman from a local ranching family. Traynor had steady work too, looking after cattle for the Hooker Ranch, and he developed a sharp eye for rustlers, and that eye fell on Bill Downing. Traynor accused Downing of brand burning, also known as mavericking, and some say he called him a rustler in public. By some accounts, the two had once been friends, but friendship turned bitter. Traynor had made no threats in killing Downing, but told him what he believed to be true. He believed him to be a rustler. But Downing had made threats about what he would do if Traynor confronted him again. On the night of the 19th of May, 1899, it all came to a head, and there are two stories for how it all played out. One story goes that Downing strode into Tom Fulgham's saloon, and Traynor was standing at the bar, drink in hand. The other has Traynor coming into the elite saloon with bartender Henry Taylor, and spotted Downing sitting near Tom Burt's in the corner. When Taylor invited the men up to have a drink, the men stood and walked over. Both accounts have Traynor dropping his right hand as if reaching for his gun. Downing may have yanked Burt's by the arm to pull him away as he drew his gun and fired. As the smoke cleared, one man lay dead. Traynor had a bullet through his chest and two through his head. Whichever story you choose, the ending was the same. Downing stepped outside and calmly handed his gun to Alford.
"I killed Slim."
When Constable Alford looked over the body of Traynor, his revolver was still in the holster, loaded with 5 cartridges, and the hammer resting on an empty chamber. This was common in the West as to prevent misfires. An inquest was held the next day, with a jury that included Heredio Brown, A.R. O'Brien, J.P. Cole, William Speed, Mr. Stanfield, Theo Wagtall, and S.B. Appel. Witnesses split their stories. Some swore Traynor had threatened Downing's life, and that he had reached for his gun first. but others muttered that most of these witnesses were Alfred's cronies, friends of Downing. Still, the coroner's jury ruled it self-defense, and Downing walked away as a free man. The facts are clear enough. Downing gunned down Traynor in a Willcox saloon. Traynor, war veteran, ranch inspector, and soon-to-be husband, died with his pistol still in the holster. The rest, who moved first, who reached for what, lies buried in the haze of gun smoke and conflicting testimony. Nearly 20 years after the Earps rode out of Arizona as fugitives, Tombstone was no longer the booming mining town it had once been. The glory days were gone, and speculators drifted north to Pierce, even hauling some of Tombstone's buildings with them. In Cochise County, a new breed of lawmen had taken root, men who straddled both sides of the law. One of the best known was Burt Alvord. Raised in Tombstone and notorious enough that the rowdy town of Willcox hired him as a constable to keep the cowboys in line. Alvord wasted no time gathering his own kind around him. He brought on Billy Stiles and Bill Downing as deputies, then began plotting ways to turn their badges into profit. Before long, Alfred's circle of lawmen turned outlaws, including Matt Burtz, the Owen brothers, and Jack Dunlap, were scheming to rob trains under the cloak of authority. But their first task was to break into the Soto brothers' warehouse in Willcox and made off with some dynamite. Following that, they next went to the mining camp in Dos Cabezas, where they found more dynamite, along with explosive caps and fuses. On the night of the 9th of September 1899, at the quiet little stop at Cochise Station, 11 miles west of Willcox, Downing had stayed back to tend the horses. Burt Alvord, the ever-clever constable/outlaw, set himself up with an alibi by drinking loudly at Joseph Schwardener's saloon in Willcox. Meanwhile, the other gang members put on their masks and boarded the train, held the engineer, fireman, mail clerk, and Wells Fargo agent at gunpoint, blew the safe open and rode off with $2,000 to $3,000, some reports going up to $30,000. But it does say that there were US dollars and Mexican currency, so I'm wondering if that was the conversion amount. Regardless, the gang made away with the money. $3,000 in 1900 is worth roughly $115,000 today. When news of the holdup hit the town, Alfred organized posses and sent them searching in every direction, except the right one. Meanwhile, the real culprits stashed their haul in Alfred's chicken house, and then in a few days, moved it to Downing's ranch near Pierce. The gang laid low, not daring to spend $1. Only one bandit left, Matt Burtz. He took his share and slipped away to Oregon. For months, the Cochise station robbery went unsolved, and Downing might have escaped altogether. But that old outlaw soul can't stay quiet for long. On the 15th of February 1900, another robbery brought the law crashing down. At Fairbank, Alfred and Stiles masterminded a new holdup, a stagecoach, this time joined again by the Owen brothers, Bob Brown, Jack Three-Finger Jack Dunlap, and Tom Bravo One Youse. That's a good nickname, Bravo One. Sounds like a damn military outfit. But their target was a northbound number 1 on the Nogales to Benson line. What they did not count on was a man by the name of Jeff Milton to be the messenger. Milton was a former Texas Ranger and Deputy U.S. Marshal. At the time, he was working as a Wells Fargo Express messenger and was known to shoot to kill. When the gang attacked, Milton fought them off despite taking a bullet that shattered his left arm, leaving it useless. Milton's gunfire severely wounded Three-Finger Jack and broke the rest of the gang. One of the outlaws was captured 6 miles from Tombstone the next morning. It was a badly wounded Three-Finger Jack, and before dying a few days later, he said Alford, Stiles, and Downing were the masterminds behind the operation. Bob Burns and the Owens were apprehended a few days later, and the loot was revealed. They had gotten away with 17 Mexican pesos. Downing was indicted for his role in the Cochise Station holdup, which under the territorial law was a capital crime, punishable by death. He and the others were taken to Cochise County Jail in Tombstone. On the 7th of April, Billy Stiles went to visit Burt Alvord in jail, when he held up the deputy marshal on duty, George Braven, demanding the release of the gang. When Braven balked, Stiles shot off 2 of his toes and freed all the gang members, except Downing. Downing's trial began on the 10th of December 1900 in Tucson. It took nearly 170 jurors to finally impanel a jury, since so many balked to the idea of hanging a man for robbery when no one had been killed. Alfred, Stiles, and Burt's all testified for the prosecution, turning once again against their old partner. Judge George Russell David told the jurors bluntly, if they found Downing guilty, the law allowed no choice but death. On the 12th of December, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty. The Bisbee Daily Review later reported that the jury was convinced of Downey's guilt, but they simply would not send him to the gallows for the robbery. But the freedom was not to last. The federal government stepped in with a new indictment, attempting to rob the U.S. mail and assaulting mail clerk C.R. McEwen with a deadly weapon. This time, in April 1901, Downing was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in the Yuma Territorial Prison. Downing entered Yuma on the 11th of April as inmate number 1733, 5 foot 8 3/4 and weighing 139 pounds. Inside, the prison doctor treated an old leg wound that Downing claimed came from a gun battle in his Texas days. There are rumors that Downing was Frank Jackson, an outlaw who rode with the Sam Bass gang, and this was the time he received his leg wound. But Karen and John Tanner wrote an excellent article on Bill Downing, says that physical differences make the Frank Jackson rumor unlikely. They also say that some other old-timers say he came to Arizona as Fate Hudson. And lastly, they say that evidence does support that he may have been Lafayette Hudson, a habitual Indian Territory offender who took, quote, French leave and disappeared from the Fort Smith, Arkansas jail hospital on the 22nd of June, 1895. Where does the truth lie? I'm frankly not too sure. It was really hard to find any solid evidence on any of it. Back to the prison doctor. When the doc told him the leg may need to be amputated, Downing scoffed, saying,
Damn thing been running for so many years. There wasn't no ways you was bothering the dog.
For all of Downing's disagreeable ways, he seemed to share a steady and healthy bond with his wife. During his years behind bars, she sold off their Willcox property and used the proceeds in a desperate attempt to win his release from Yuma. She later moved to Tucson, taking work as a servant despite her failing health. Sadly, she died of heart failure only a short time before Downing walked free. When Bill Downing walked out of Yuma prison on the 8th of October, 1907, he was a free man once more, but not a changed one. The years in prison had hardened him. He returned to Willcox bitter and mean. Here, he opened the Free and Easy Saloon, located on Maley Street, right across the street from where Warren Earp was gunned down in 1900. The place quickly gained a reputation as one of the roughest joints in town. Gambling, whiskey, and women kept it alive, and Downing ruled it with a mean temper and a quick hand for violence, and no respect for the law. Though serving liquor to women and prostitution were both illegal, he ignored the statutes and carried on anyway. He even traded his working girls in the art of pickpocketing, taking their nightly earnings and hiding it away in his own secret stash. On the 1st of July, 1908, the new constable, Bud Snow, backed by Arizona Ranger William Slaughter Speed, also known as Billy, who served on the jury that found Downing not guilty, hauled Downing in for serving liquor to women at the Free and Easy. He pled guilty and paid a $50 fine. The very next day, Snow and Speed arrested Downing for assaulting a barber, and he paid another fine of $10. Rumors swirled. Some said he was even back to cattle rustling. What no one doubted was his temper. He cursed employees, threatened merchants, and scorned his neighbors. Folks feared to report him, sure he'd take revenge on them. The town had grown wary of his antics. Citizens petitioned to revoke his license, and Justice of the Peace, J.C. Page, begged the Arizona Rangers for help. Captain Harry C. Wheeler, knowing Downing's reputation, ordered his men, if Downing made a single hostile move, shoot him down. Early in August 1908, Downing quarreled with a woman who worked for him, Cuco Leal. He threw her out and told Constable Snow he wanted her gone for good. At the same time, he warned Snow he wanted no dealing with Ranger Speed.
If Speed ever sticks his head inside my door, I'll shoot it off. And if he does not come in, I'll kill the son of a bitch anyway.
Speed was out of town because he was doing some scouting for the Rangers on a separate job. But when he returned, Captain Wheeler wrote him directly, saying,
I want you to take no chance with this man in any official dealing you may have with him. Of course, I would desire a peaceful arrest, but if anyone must be hurt, it must not be yourself. By
August, Downing once again accused Cuco Leal of stealing money. this time from Ralph E. Cushman, while cash was still on the table. In reality, she'd been caught pickpocketing, likely at Downing's own instruction, yet he beat her anyway for it, leaving her with a black eye. One report does note that Leal didn't take it quietly. She retaliated by smashing a glass bottle over his head. Regardless, she fled to George McKittrick's Ranchman Corral, a rival saloon. McKittrick, who already hated Downing, made sure Judge Page issued an arrest warrant. Leal was given a room at the local hotel, and Constable Snow was handed the warrant for Downing's arrest. By now, Downing had stacked up enemies: McKittrick, who wanted him gone, the townsfolk who feared him, Snow, who had a warrant in hand, and Billy Speed, the ranger he swore to kill. Snow made his way to Ranger Speed's home and told him he had a warrant for Downing's arrest. Ranger Speed replied that they will go in the morning, probably thinking that Downing will be groggy and hungover after a heavy night of drinking. By the morning of the 5th of August 1908, Bill Downing was in a dangerous mood, starting his day with some more whiskey for breakfast, growling to R.E. Cushman, a Southern Pacific agent who'd spent the night at the saloon, that the lawmen were after him. Cushman advised him to act like a man, go down and pay the fine if he's guilty. If not, he'd be clear. But Downing was surly, bitter, and just spoiling for trouble. Downing reached for a revolver hidden behind the bar. Cushman warned him not to be a fool, but Downing did not listen. At 8 a.m., Speed and Snow went to the Free and Easy, calling for Downing to come outside.
Come outside now, Downing.
Downing bolted out the back door, but Ranger Speed predicted this move and met him in the alley and ordered him to throw up his hands. But Downing wasn't one to give up. He rushed forward and reached for his pistol, but it wasn't there. Where the hell was his pistol? Ranger Speed shouldered his .30-40 Winchester and seeing that Downing was going for his gun, pulled the trigger. The bullet smashed into Downing's chest, tore through his lung, and burst out his back. Downing staggered, collapsed, and was dead within minutes. Now there are several different accounts as to why Downing didn't have his pistol. The first is that when he got it from the saloon, he set it down before leaving out the back door. Another story is that Cushman had grabbed it from him while Downing wasn't paying attention. But by far my favorite is that Cuco Leal was at the saloon, and since Downing had trained her in the art of pickpocketing, she took it out from him as he was walking out the back door. Unfortunately, she most likely wasn't even there, so this didn't happen, but it's still a good story. Constable Snow searched the weapon where it fell. He found no weapon, only valuables: 2 rings, a watch and chain, spectacles, handkerchiefs, small coins, and $212.55 tucked into his trousers. A coroner's jury was quickly gathered. Witnesses included Snow, Cummings, Cushman, George McKittrick, and Joe Brady, all of whom testified that Downing had sworn never to be taken alive. The jury's decision was unanimous. Ranger Billy Speed had fired in the line of duty and was justified in the killing of Bill Downing. In the days after Downing's death, a petition circulated through Willcox. One account noted it was pretty generally signed by everyone to whom it was presented, requesting the Board of Supervisors to forever refuse a license for the sale of liquors in the saloon formerly run by W.F. Downing, deceased. Arizona Ranger Captain Wheeler summed up the town's feelings in blunt fashion.
This is the first time I have known a dead man to be without a single friend, and the first time that I have known a killing to meet absolute general rejoicing in all this town and precinct.
Downing is buried in the Willcox Historical Cemetery in an unmarked grave. The most hated outlaw in Arizona Territory died with no friends. I hope you'll enjoy this episode on Bill Downing. If you enjoy Wild West Deep Dives, please subscribe and maybe give it a like if you feel so inclined. In the coming weeks, I'm going to focus on one-off episodes while I work on the deep dive into the life and legend of Joe Meek. Share this with a friend or family member or your worst enemy. Either way, I greatly appreciate y'all's support. If you want to chat about history or yell at me for something, email me, wildwestdeepdives@gmail.com. We will see y'all next time, and remember, when in doubt, shoot straight, shoot fast. God bless.